Hello, welcome to Lazada Insider, featuring knowledge that makes a difference. We share trusted insights, forward looking perspectives, and exclusive expert interviews to keep you ahead of the curve.
Hi everyone, I'm Chen, your host today. The COVID 19 pandemic is still unfolding in Southeast Asia, especially with the recent spread of the Delta variant. The prolonged pandemic not only puts enormous pressure on countries' healthcare system, but also brought long-lasting impacts to the economies in the region. What will happen in the year ahead, and what are the implications for business operating in this part of the world? Today, we are delighted to be joined by expert guest James from Asian Development Bank. He is the senior economics at the ADB Southeast Asia Regional Department, in short, SERD. He conducts research on economics and regional cooperation issues in Southeast Asia and also leads the SERD Policy Network of Economics. He regularly writes economics outlooks and risk assessment for Southeast Asia and also examines its medium-term macroeconomics, policy, and development issues. Hi, James. Welcome to Lazada Insider.
Hi, Chen. Thank you for having me.
First of all, James, you are the senior economics with ADB. Can you please tell us more about your positions and what you do?
Thank you, Chen. In my role as senior economist in the Southeast Asia Regional Department, my main role is really to conduct research on economic and regional issues, particularly because our focus is on economic recovery. We have been looking quite closely into the sustainable recovery pathways for ASEAN in terms of what are the possible trajectories, what are the risks, and where are we now. So that's a short description.
Sure. Let's kickstart today's discussion with some overall economics pictures. So, how has Southeast Asia's economics been progressed in recent 6 months, and what have been the bright spots and challenges?
Southeast Asian economy is actually a very strong region, as you know. No, it has a very big population of about 640 million, which is also its strength. So in the last 6 months, we've really seen a very robust recovery in Southeast Asia compared to a year ago. For example, our latest ADB forecast released in July estimate that the region will grow around 4% in 2021 compared to the minus 4% decline in 2020. So that's almost 180-degree recovery from where we are last year. However, having said that, we are also seeing a second wave and third wave reemergence of a more transmissible Delta variant of the COVID-19, which is somehow slowing the growth momentum, especially when we entered June, July, and even up to this month. So we are now assessing the forecast for Southeast Asia, and I think there is a possibility for some downgrades for 2021 and 2022 growth. Our official forecast will be released on 22 September. In terms of the bright spots, there are three spots or areas that I can speak about. The first one is really domestic consumption. As you all know, Southeast Asia as a region has actually uh, intervened quite heavily in terms of COVID-19. As a proportion of GDP, for example, in 2020, authorities in Southeast Asia have almost injected 24% of GDP in fiscal stimulus. For this year, our estimate from the ADB database is that the injections in fiscal stimulus are much smaller at around 16%, but it's actually supporting a very solid rebound in consumer demand. Second, the pent-up demand from last year has actually supported purchases for discretionary items as well as essentials. And in particular, the efficiency in buying goods and services through apps like Lazada is helping households still access needed goods and services. So consumer will contribute a large proportion to growth. The second the bright spot is really manufacturing, particularly electrical and electronics, and also the commodities. Because of the strong global recovery in advanced economies like the US, Europe, Japan, the demand for manufactured goods from Asia has actually supported the manufacturing PMI in the region. So if you look at the manufacturing PMI in the region from January to May, they are actually on the expansionary phase. But again, as we've seen the resurgence of Delta variant as early as May, we are seeing some slowdown in the PMI of manufacturing in June and July. So that's actually a worry. The last spot really is the exports, exports for the region. And exports are actually rebounding. One, because of the increasing demand for manufactured goods. Second, commodity prices has actually increased, and the demand for commodities, including oil, minerals, metals, heavy metals, have also increased. So that's a bright spot. In terms of the key challenge, I think the key challenge still is the resurgence of the more transmissible Delta variant, which we are seeing in the whole of Southeast Asia. In particular, I think Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, the Philippines are actually experiencing very high rates of positive COVID cases. For example, if you compare the positive COVID cases in April for ASEAN, it has increased 5 times from about 20, if I'm not mistaken, 29 per million. It has reached to about 130 per million. So that's how the number of positive COVID cases from these transmissible variants has really emerged. So if you look at the total cases in 2021 as compared to last year, we have more COVID cases now than before. So that remains to be the challenge.
Cool. So as we look back 2020, so what are the lessons that do you think we draw, and particularly for the business?
I think for business, I would think that there are 3 key lessons from this pandemic. One is actually the importance of being prepared to use and leverage digital platforms and technology. Because what we've seen since last year is that almost everything has shifted online. So from the access to medical services, access to education, for payments and remittances of money, even for our own entertainment, for ordering food, everything has shifted online. So a business that cannot be onboarded to online platform will have difficulty continuing this business. So I think that's a very important lesson. I think the second lesson is really the importance of reducing business cost, operating cost, and capital expenditures. And this is important because we have seen softness in business activities and profit, and this has affected our balance sheet for most companies. And to help repair that balance sheet, we also need to bring down cost. And even in the future, as we see a strong recovery emerging, the uncertainty and the volatility of COVID-19 suggests that this will be a cyclical recovery rather than a linear recovery. So we still need to manage our costs, conserve our cash to strengthen the balance sheet. So I think that's second. I think that the third one really is the importance to promote efficiency in the workplace and also consolidate the business model. Because the implication of COVID-19 is actually to increase cost, right? So whatever we do in business, it's actually become more expensive. So to offset that impact on business of COVID, we need to invest, I think, in automation. That's number one. Bring about improvement in business processes, adopt innovation at the workplace to reduce cost, as well as leverage the digital technology. So I guess those 3 lessons are very important for business with this pandemic.
So after drawing some lessons from the past, so let's say if we look at the future, next 1 year, what does the outlook look like for Southeast Asia?
From the ADB point of view, we are still quite optimistic that Southeast Asia is a very resilient region. So based on our ADB forecast released in July, the regional economic growth in Southeast Asia will increase to around 5.2% in 2022 from 4% in 2020. However, having said that, as I said, we are reviewing the forecast, and still I will think that there will be a downward revision to our forecast. So the forecast will probably be that 5.2 as originally envisaged in July, but I think it will still be a strong economic recovery. Now, and primarily because although the effectiveness and speed of vaccination is actually proceeding quite slowly in Southeast Asia, only 3 countries have actually managed to roll out vaccination very effectively. Of course, Singapore is ahead with about 76% of the population vaccinated. Cambodia actually is also a very good example with almost 50% of their population vaccinated. And third is Malaysia with about 43% of their population vaccinated. In the Philippines, where I work, the vaccination rate nationally is still below 20%. Although if you look at the national capital region in Metro Manila, where most of the output is produced, as of August 22, vaccination rate for targeted population is also 43%. So I expect that by 2022, I think the vaccination in Southeast Asia would have gained more traction. No? Now, the question is whether there are other variants that will emerge which may not be covered by the existing vaccines. That's the other challenge.
Sure. So under this situation, so what are the key risks our businesses need to watch out for?
So I would imagine the 3 key risks that business will be confronting now and in the next 1 year. And the primary risk really is the volatility and uncertainty of the COVID-19 pathogen. So far, we have seen 2 variants which are transmissible and could escape existing vaccine, the Delta and the Lambda variant. And this pandemic is actually in its early stage. We are just on the 2nd year. No? So, for example, the Spanish flu was there for 10 years. And I think, despite advances in science, I think this pandemic will also last a bit longer. No? So that's the first and foremost risk, is to be able to prepare with these intermittent or recurring business disruptions as new COVID-19 variants emerge, which will require some mobility restrictions. No? So again, to prepare for this, I think moving to online digital platform and automating most of our activities will help business prepare for that. The second risk, I think, is really the prolonged containment of this COVID-19. I remember, I think last year, when we were in July, we were thinking that I think next year it will be all over and more normal. Then January, February came, and then we see this Delta variant, and we're back to square one. So I think that the risk of a more prolonged management of COVID-19 will actually affect many economies in the region because of increased fiscal stimulus. The fiscal deficit and debt in the region has actually increased. For example, if you look at Malaysia, the Philippines, and Thailand, their debt ratio in 2020 actually increased by 9 to 10% of their GDP. That's a large proportion. Even countries like Laos, PDR, Indonesia also increased their GDP to debt ratio by 6%. And this will have implications on the ability of the government to continue providing fiscal stimulus. And some of those stimulus are actually directed to providing credit to business, providing equity to business. So I think government assistance to business could potentially actually slow down, which means that business will need to dig deep in terms of its resources and in terms of its asset to really ride this pandemic. I think that's the second risk for business.
Cool. How about business opportunities? Do you have any advice to share with our audience?
Yes, of course, I know that I think being in Lazada, most of your audience would know that e-commerce, e-hailing for delivery are very large good business opportunities. But let me focus on one sector which may not be on the radar screen of your clients. In November this year, there will be a meeting of 196 leaders from all over the world to discuss the COP21 Paris Agreement. We will be reviewing how countries have actually fared in terms of their climate change commitment. And all over the region, especially in Southeast Asia, when we deal with governments in terms of economic recovery, they're actually focusing on green recovery. And this green recovery comprises and affects many areas. So, for one, green recovery can actually touch in terms of renewable energy, the move to shift from fossil fuel to more renewable energy such as wind, solar, and clean coal. And these will be big opportunities. And aside from that, there's also a big push as part of the green agenda and as part of our commitment to reduce emissions at least to a net zero carbon emission, to really promote what we call the circular economy. Circular economy basically prioritizes two sectors. One is recycling, and the other one is actually waste management. So, for example, in recycling, there are so many innovative companies that are actually using garbage for many of our consumer and industrial uses. For example, in Singapore, cigarette butts are now being collected and used as construction materials for building roads. No? As we promote healthy oceans and the blue initiatives, we are seeing a strong policy move to ban plastics in the region, because we have learned that plastic ends up in the ocean, and when ends up in the ocean, it also ends up in our food system and on our table. So at the ADB, we are actually promoting for blue oceans, and there's a lot of push for a better improvement in waste management, especially for plastics. So I think this is there are so many components in the supply chain in terms of developing a green supply chain that will provide goods and services that complies with a greener standard. The second opportunity for business is because of the shift to online. We are really seeing at the ADB the high demand for services related to data flow and data warehousing, as well as the provision of services for data privacy and cybersecurity. So I think specifically for IT business, I think this is really a big area, because you know that the bandwidth of most countries are actually under great strain because of all this shift to online. No? And this data, almost all this data, whether it's data in terms of communication, whether it's data in terms of purchase of medical services, whether it's data in terms of the conduct of online classroom, it has to be stored and it has to be managed in terms of cross-border flows. And the service provider as well are not located within the national economy. Usually, for example, for most of the education startup or medical startup, they're actually located in Singapore. So you would need the ability to really support this massive cross-border flow of data and data warehousing. So I think that's another opportunity that I think business should really look into.
Thank you for sharing. And that brings us to the end of today's episode. Thank you, James, again for your great sharing.
Thank you, Chen. Have a nice day.
This is Lazada Insider. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Make sure you click follow and subscribe so you don't miss our latest insights and expert interviews. Thanks again for joining us. Until next time, take care.
Lazada.